You are my Lord and my God.
All of the visitors have left Joseph and Mary and Jesus. The Magi have gone back to their homes. And you might think it's about time for Joseph and Mary and Jesus to head back to their home too, since their trip to Bethlehem was only meant to be temporary. That's not what happens. We already read it in Matthew chapter 2, but it does happen like this. Joseph has another dream, another visit by a heavenly messenger in that dream. First message was, take Mary as your wife. Don't be afraid of that. Now comes another message. He has a baby to raise, but now there's a warning. And it is like this. You need to go to Egypt. Go now. Take your family and go to Egypt. Why? Herod is looking to kill the baby. So he gets up to go to Egypt, and he says he's told to stay there until he is told to return. So he does it. We don't know much about Joseph, but it's a lot to admire even from the little we know. Matthew's already told us that he is a righteous man, and we see him at every turn just trying to do the right thing, doing the impossible, if that's what it takes just to believe it. He's faithful, believes as God commands, he goes, and right now he acts. He gets up immediately, takes his family, packs up, looks like in the middle of the night, take what they can and head on to Egypt, headed southwest to Egypt. It's interesting how often Egypt has become in the scriptures a place of safety for the people of God. If you know some of the stories, they sometimes an individual or a group will end up in Egypt, and it will be their salvation in some respects. Don't take that to mean all of them, because Joseph's descendants can tell you that didn't end well. But here again, Egypt is a safe place for a time for Jesus' young family. And as Moses, the great deliverer of the people, was saved there instead of being slaughtered by Pharaoh, so Jesus will also be saved from the slaughter ordered by Herod. More about that in a minute. Matthew's glad to reach back to Hosea's words that where God is calling his son out of Egypt, and he lays the groundwork as he continues to show that Jesus is fulfilling all of those words said of old. Don't you wonder how Joseph and Mary traveled? Was it by donkey? Was it by foot? If you know how hard it is to travel with a baby in our day, with our conveniences and luxuries, what was it like for them? What route did they take? Where did they settle once they got there? How long were they there? And what did they do while they were there? Lots of questions, no answers from the scriptures. So we're left in the dark, and we also assume Joseph is also. He doesn't know what to do except stay, and he stays until he gets a word. He obeys until he finds what he is supposed to do next. And he, I think, is just an example of simple and sturdy faith. Now back to Herod. The Magi were warned to go back home a different way, and Joseph is warned to go to Egypt. Looks like everybody knows what's going on except Herod. Herod is being left out, and for good reason. He hates it. He's furious when he finds out the wise men had wisely avoided him. Looks like he's working on a plan to find the baby king, and as he says, worship him. But Herod's a madman. He has no intention of worshiping a rival king. We already know something of Herod's nature from Josephus' writings. What we know is that he is crazy, in our words anyway, even in his own family. You don't last long if you seem to be a threat to him or the crown. He even killed his sons and his wife and anyone else who might get in the way, I suppose. Cruel man. Augustus had said at one point, it's better to be Herod's pig than Herod's son. It's shocking, but shouldn't be surprising what Herod does next in our reading. When he finds out he's not going to find out where the baby king of the Jews is, he decides to wipe out all the baby boys in that age range, in that area, just to get the one. He doesn't know what we already know. He can't kill Jesus, not only because Jesus is already out of his reach, but God is not going to allow Jesus to die before his time. But Herod still does the unthinkable. He gives orders to kill all the boys in that age range, 2 years or younger, in the vicinity around Bethlehem. Why 2 years? It's what he learned from the information he gleaned from the Magi. Was Jesus getting toward 2 years old, or was Herod just being sure he kills the right one, if his calculations are correct? We don't know for sure. But the henchmen must have gone out, slaughtered the babies as they were told. McGee guesses that maybe he told his soldiers to sweep through the area, beginning up in the north, Ramah, and all through Jerusalem and down as far as Bethlehem. If that's the case, there may have been a lot of babies killed. Or if Wiersbe's guess is right, and the murders took place just around Bethlehem, there may have been only, say, 20 or so babies killed, because Bethlehem just wasn't that big of a place. Also, this story really doesn't stack up compared to other atrocities meted out by the cruel Herod. Maybe that's why this one isn't really recorded anywhere else except in the scriptures. Matthew quotes again from an old prophet of long ago, this time Jeremiah, in the symbolic crying of Rachel, weeping and refusing to be comforted. It's the collective voice of the mothers of Israel personified in Rachel in this pure moment of agony over all of the babies murdered. If you know Rachel's story in the Old Testament, she's the favorite wife of Jacob, and she died while giving birth to her youngest son. She named him Benoni, son of my sorrow. Jacob changed his name to Benjamin, a son of my right hand. Jacob buried his wife that he loved just outside of Bethlehem. So we think of Bethlehem as a place of joy, a place of rejoicing, a place of birth. Jacob and Rachel would have seen that place differently, as would the mothers of the babies killed by Herod. We might easily slide over this little detail in the Bible about these babies' deaths, but you wouldn't if you were one of the wailing mothers. Anytime you hear about a young one being killed, it has to rattle you. It should rattle you. In June, just this past summer, up in Chicago, a 20-month-old boy was riding in the back seat of his mother's car. She's headed home after the trip to the laundromat, and a car pulls up next to hers and starts shooting. The mother is grazed in the head, but the baby is killed in the back seat. The police chief said this is happening far too often. Too many times children are killed by senseless violence. When is it going to stop? When are we going to say enough is enough? A minister named Price said, I just want to sit on the side of the curb, that's where the mother was, and shake my head and cry. If you're not mad, if you're not outraged, if you're not heartbroken about this, then what will you be heartbroken about? And do you have a heart? To hear a mother crying over the death of her child, the murder of her child, must be horrendous. You don't have to go to the inner city of Chicago to see that kind of violence against the very young. Some mothers in this area know too. Even here just last week, Benton County, there was a 4-year-old girl who was found dead in her bedroom. She had been beaten from head to toe, submerged in a pond, left to freeze on a bank before taken back into the house. And just this month, a man was given a 3rd life sentence. If you know the story, in Webster County, he killed a 2-year-old. There's something just gut-wrenchingly awful about the murder of the most innocent among us, the youngest. The stories are hard to hear and hard to comprehend. How could Herod have done it? How could he have killed the babies and then slept at night and lived with himself? We learned back in chapter 2 that Herod was disturbed when he heard the words of the Magi. The truth is, Herod was just disturbed. He was a paranoid fanatic. He was a ruthless man. He wasn't stable. He was a madman. He was called Herod the Great, but I promise you, there's not much great about him. And any mother in the Bethlehem region whose baby had been taken from her and murdered in front of her could have told you what kind of a man he was. Herod hated Herod. Herod died in the 37th year of his reign, age 70, while staying in Jericho. And we can't know exactly when that date was, but a lot of the experts would put his death between 2 and 4 years after Jesus was born. Josephus describes the painful disease Herod struggled with and finally took his life. Ulcerated colon and putrefied and worm-eaten insides and constant convulsions, troubled breathing, even a foul-smelling breath. He was a foul kind of individual, a mean man, and I don't know that anybody would have truly mourned for him when he died. True to his word, when Herod dies, an angel of the Lord appears to Joseph again in a dream. If you're counting, that's 3 times, and tells him that this is safe now. It's finally safe to leave Egypt and go back. His words are, those who were trying to take your life, the life of the baby, the child, are gone. They're dead. We don't know how many were in on it, but now that Herod is dead, the danger apparently disappears. So Joseph gets up, once again takes his family, this time back north, back to the land of Israel. If you're familiar with Luke's gospel, we know Joseph's roots are in Bethlehem already, but he ends up living in Nazareth and takes this census trip to Bethlehem. That's where Jesus is born. Now they're headed back, and it looks like in Matthew's gospel, they're thinking about settling back in Bethlehem, in Judea. But Joseph then hears about who's taking Herod the Great's place in ruling. It is his own son Archelaus, and he fears maybe like father, like son, and his fears would be confirmed because he becomes a tyrant like his father. He'd be known for killing 3,000 citizens at one time around the Passover time, if that tells you anything. Joseph had been warned about this in a dream. He settles in Nazareth of Galilee to raise his family. And with that, Matthew keeps putting these pieces of the puzzle together to give us the fuller story. And as he loves to do again, he reaches back, pulls a prophecy. It's a kind of a general one about being a Nazarene. We don't know where that's heard from, but apparently it's in this bigger idea of being despised and rejected of men. That's what Jesus would grow up to be. As Nathanael would point it out in the Gospel of John, how could anything good come from Nazareth? We just figure the Jews of that day would have understood what he was referring to. It's quite a story, really. We sometimes mistakenly think Jesus' birth was just sweet and nice. That the shepherds, the angels, the wise men, the manger, the gifts, oh, could it be any more wonderful? But there's more to the story as we have just read. Tom Wright says he was one time preaching at a big Christmas service, and a well-known historian who was really famous for being skeptical about Christianity, all things Christian, he'd been persuaded to come with his family, and Tom says, afterwards he approached me, all smiles. I finally worked out, he declared, why people like Christmas. Oh, really, he said. What is it? Do tell me. A baby threatens no one, he said. So the whole thing is a happy event which means nothing at all. He writes, I was dumbfounded. At the heart of the Christmas story in Matthew's gospel is a baby who poses such a threat to the most powerful man around that he kills a whole village full of babies in order to get rid of him. The gospel of Jesus the Messiah was born then in a land and at a time of trouble, tension, violence, and fear. Banish all thoughts of peaceful Christmas scenes, he says. Before the Prince of Peace had learned to walk and talk, he was a homeless refugee with a price on his head. This is how Israel's Redeemer was to appear. This is how God would set about liberating his people and bringing justice to the whole world. No point in arriving in comfort when the world is in misery. No point having an easy life when the world suffers violence and injustice. And then he says this, if he is to be Emmanuel, God with us, he must be with us where the pain is. It's great to enjoy Christmas, and I hope you have. I hope you think of the sweetness of the story. But there's more to the story, as Matthew has just pointed out. So keep reading the gospel. That baby, born King of the Jews, survives that slaughter, this mad king's passion to get rid of him, but he won't survive the slaughter of another group of people, the killing of another kind on a wooden cross. He will grow up to be that one hanging on that cross. The story that begins in blood ends in blood, from the slaughter of the innocent ones to the slaughter of the most innocent one ever. We might be left with questions like, why would God allow those innocent babies to die and Jesus to survive? Doesn't seem unfair? By the end of the story on earth, his last story on earth, he is going to die, and everyone else will be spared if they would just believe in him. That might seem unfair. We who believe have questions too, but we hold on to our questions and instead offer to God just our gratitude and praise for what we understand about the whole story. Because he was spared death just after his birth, but we are the ones who are spared death because of his death on the cross. And one more thing. Here we are on the last Sunday of 2020 and just wondering what the new year will bring. I just want us to remember that whatever comes, whether there is rejoicing at the birth of life or there is mourning at the loss of life, whether there is peace in our world or war at every turn, whether good kings rule well or evil kings wreak havoc, Whether times are good and everyone is healthy or times are hard and some are dying, don't give up hope. God has not forsaken his people. I can't tell you really why some folks live and others die. I can't explain why some children are born and don't even live long and others survive and grow old. I don't know why some barely even notice a virus and it barely touches them and others are killed by it. I just know this, the Lord has not abandoned us. No matter what this past year has been like, we all hope 2021 will be better. But in some ways it doesn't matter what comes in 2021 as long as God reigns and he is in charge. And even if the troubles follow us from one year to the next, we will not be alarmed. We will face it with faith. Because Jesus himself said, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. John 16:33. Our perspective of trouble has changed forever. It's changed by the Lord himself, and Paul was changed by him, and he saw it all clearly as you write 2 Corinthians 4, For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. No matter what it looks like around us in this coming year, we see with different eyes. We stare with an eternal gaze, and we believe with an unshakable faith, because the Lord has come, and he will not leave us nor forsake us.